Hello and welcome back to another Blu-ray review, and we're still in the world of Hong Kong cinema and might be stuck there for quite some time, but not that I'm complaining. This time we're going to be talking about the 1982 horror comedy action film, The Dead and the Deadly, starring Sammo Hung and directed by Wu Ma. So this one I was really intrigued by because I just love Sammo Hung, but it's also a kind of a genre I've not seen him in before. This is coming off the heels of films like Mr. Vampire and Spooky Encounters of the Spooky Kind, also starring Sammo Hung. And I love this slipcover; it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, I was intrigued going into this one. I heard that it wasn't as action heavy as maybe some people might be expecting from a Sammo Hung film. Of course, he's primarily this martial arts action star. But going in, I'd heard it was more comedy oriented, and I was kind of like, well, okay, that might be interesting, but we'll see. So I gave it a shot, and I was also kind of a little bit. My interest was also piqued because Wu Ma directs this film, also stars in it as one of the major roles, and I know him very dearly from the film A Chinese Ghost Story, which is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. He plays the Taoist priest in that film, and he's so funny and memorable in that film and the sequel. So that intrigued me too. So it was the Sammo kind of effect and the Wu Ma kind of pull, and I was like, okay, let's check it out. But I have to say, I absolutely loved this, and it wasn't because of the action scenes; it was because of the comedy. And I found that it really translated well to my sensibilities. And I have to give, and I don't think I've ever done this before, but I wanted to give credit to the person who did the subtitles on this. I'm sure it says in the back, newly translated subtitles, because they usually have that for almost, optional English subtitles, newly translated for this release. And in the booklet, it tells me that the guy who did that was Tim Wong. So Tim Wong, I just want to give you credit for this release, because I feel like I've enjoyed the nuance of dialogue in this foreign film to me more than I've done in a lot of films, especially in Hong Kong movies, because there's dialogue in this film that's snappy and witty. At least it comes across that way in the translation. I understand that when in translating one language to another, you're never going to get a one-to-one kind of translation. So there has to be kind of almost artistic input from the person who's translating, I guess, to kind of to get you the feel in that different language that most appropriately suits the tone and the words and the intent from the original language. But there's these two side characters in the film who are kind of the goofy R2-D2 C3PO bickering, old couple with horrendous haircuts. And they're one of them always tries to say like a really fancy word and he gets it wrong. And the other was like, no, you idiot, it's this. And just those like interactions, I felt like a lot of care was put into making the comedy of that shine through the English subtitles. So I just want to give Tim Wong some credit, because I just thought that I really absorbed myself more into the dialogue of this film than I have done in a foreign film for a very long time. So I thought the subtitles were great. However accurate they were, I don't know, but I feel like they accurately represented the comedy of this film, which to me was really successful, and I thought it was hilarious. So let's get into the film a little bit here before we continue on with the review and talk about the Blu-ray and stuff. So this is an interesting story. Sammo it's set maybe 100 or so years ago, and Sammo plays, he does have a character name. I think it's Chu Wang Li, but he's just referred to in the whole film as either Fatty, Fat Boy, or Dumb Boy. And it's like, I wonder if, like, because he was kind of involved in a lot of films that he made, either in a producing capacity or a writing capacity, which I believe he did some writing on this film. Obviously, Wu Ma was directing it, but, he had a lot of pull in kind of, the production of these films. I half wonder if it's kind of the Kevin Smith school of self-deprecation when it comes to someone's weight, where it's like, Kevin Smith is always calling himself a fat fuck and all this kind of stuff because he gets there before anyone else can. And I wonder if Sammo, like, is just like, right, I'm going to call myself fatty, dumb boy in the film, so that no one can comment on my weight because I've already done it. I've already played that joke on myself. It feels like a self-defense mechanism sort of thing to me. But either way, Fatty, as he's known in the film, he isn't really like a martial artist as he kind of is in most other films, or at least shows a lot of kind of prowess. In fact, the whole gag of the final, or near the end of the film, is that when he does get into a really cool fight scene, it's not actually his character Fatty doing it. He kind of gets possessed, which is where the spooky elements of the film come into play. But it's really about this character played by the director himself, Wu Ma, who I tried to learn the pronunciation for this character's name from the audio commentaries. Couldn't for the life of me nail it down, but in the subtitles he's known as Lucho. And Lucho was this kind of man who had a very privileged background. His family were very rich. And I guess he had siblings who went on to kind of, to do the right thing by the family. But Lucho just kind of squandered all his money, was very decadent, became a disgrace. But he's coming back to his hometown where Fatty lives. It's hard to say that with a straight face. But he's dead. He's been brought back. There's a funeral procession, and there's a young woman who is carrying his child. Who's 8 months pregnant. And Fatty instantly kind of is suspicious of this because we go back into a flashback. Very funny scene, very crude, where Fatty is with Lucho at kind of a brothel, and Lucho takes this aphrodisiac, and Fatty's like, well, it can't really work, can it? So he takes them himself, and he gets, he gets very aroused, and he's trying to hide it. They don't show a boner sticking out or anything, but he's walking around the brothel just doing anything he can to not like. And it's really funny the way that they kind of play around with it. And I thought that even though it was kind of crass, it was kind of funny. But the whole point of it, and I was starting to think, like, what is the point of this weird boner, like, gag? And I realized it's that Fatty realizes that Lucho was impotent, because even with the aphrodisiac that made him so horny, Lucho wasn't able to get it up for this prostitute. So how the hell did he, bear a child? Well, the woman's bearing the child. How did he conceive a child that this woman is bearing for him? But it becomes clear that there's a scam going on, and you realize that Wu Ma's character Lucho is actually not dead, and he's pretending to be dead, so that his body can be taken into kind of the tomb that his family has prepared for him, that is filled with all these priceless antiques and artifacts and stuff. So he's made a deal with these people that they'll come along and kind of sell the story that he's dead, and he'll share with them the riches afterwards. And it leads to some really funny stuff where, Fatty is like, he's convinced there's something wrong. So he goes to hide near Lucho's body, which is being held kind of in state, in public. And he is dressed up as one of these paper mache effigies. And they talk about this in the audio commentaries. This is a real thing that when people, even to this day, when people die in Hong Kong, I'm not sure if in other areas of China as well, these paper mache effigies of things that they want to take with them into the afterlife. And it can be anything. It can be a person, like a wife or whatever. And they take those kind of effigies, the paper mache stuff, and they have it there during the funeral kind of lying in state period and stuff, where the body is displayed, another thing they still do. And then they burn them, and that's where they'll come through to the afterlife. So Sammo Hung is like, he's dressed up as this paper mache thing. And there's a bit where his kid comes up and he's just like stabbing holes in all the paper mache statues. And of course he gets to Fatty, and he stood there like trying to stay still in front of everyone, and he's getting burned and all this kind of stuff. I think I really like gelled with the comedy in this film, and then he waits until everyone's gone, and now he's gonna like check Lucho's body, because surely there's something wrong here, and he's flipping him over on the table and stuff, and like I just thought it was fantastic, like slapstick humor, and he's like looking up his ass and stuff. And Lucho has to stay completely still. And when he's found nothing, he's found no kind of, there's been no foul play, someone else turns up. And now Fatty's got to pretend to be a statue again, a paper mache statue. And this guy is like saying to Lucho's body, like, oh, I'm gonna take, your jewels and stuff and whatever, and but I'll owe you double in the afterlife. But then he realizes, oh, there's nothing here. But then he decides to take Lucho's golden teeth, and this whole sequence, which for me, as someone who has really bad teeth, it's almost painful. But I found the kind of the twisted humor in it. He's trying to get this gold teeth out of Lucho, and Wu Ma's there just like acting completely still, but his teeth are being pulled by this fucking string. And it's just, it's excruciating, but it's hilarious, and you're wondering what the hell's going to happen. The suspense is brilliant. But the whole hook of the story, I'm getting way ahead of myself just describing funny scenes in the film. the whole hook of the film is that in the end, Lucho gets killed for real. So now he comes back as a ghost. And there's some really fun, inventive stuff going on with the camera and with like practical effects and even kind of rotoscopic, if that's even a word, being a rotoscoping kind of animation and stuff is used to kind of portray the kind of spooky elements of this film. And now Lucho has come back to haunt Fatty and to get him to help him seek revenge against the people who wronged him. And so that's kind of the main hook of the back end of the film. And in the end, they end up doing this kind of body transfer. And so you see kind of Sammo Hung pretending to be this Wu Ma character with the gurning kind of underbite, which is kind of funny. And then he gets to kick ass and kind of show off all the stuff. Because you get previous scene with Lucho kind of defending himself against these ninjas, which is really like a really, really nice little mini fight scene that was full of some really cool choreography. And yeah, and I actually thought that the action stuff really complemented the rest of the film well because the comedy was so good and I was really intrigued in the story. And there's some really good special effects going on, just little tricks here that, that I feel like they used every trick in the book in this film. There's another really funny scene, this is one of my favorites of the whole film, is when Lucho is still alive, but he, obviously is lying there when Sammo is like saying, oh, there's something wrong here, it's not right. So he wants to throw Fatty Dumb Boy off the scent. So he pretends to be a ghost, in front of Fatty, and he's kind of being held by these two men on the other side of the wall, and there's some smoke coming out. And he's acting very seriously, but then he just starts coughing with the smoke. and now Fatty's like gone from being scared to arguing with him, and they're arguing back and forth. It's fucking, I'm priceless. So, and of course it foreshadows the kind of the dark irony to that is what would happen later on in the film, that he would come back to haunt Fatty to kind of, to help him. So the interesting thing to me is that the film kind of ends in a way, and then there's a whole other sequence after it that's, you can't really call it an epilogue or a coda because it's a bit more substantial, but there's a minor character at the beginning of the film, this young woman who is actually kind of been set to marry Fatty. When they were kids, it was decided as an arranged marriage, but he's refusing to marry her, and she's kind of, put down by that. But he does say later on that he kind of he knows it wouldn't be a good life for her, and he doesn't think very highly of himself. But she disappears for the whole film, and then she comes back right at the very end to play a very important part. I won't spoil what that is, but she's a very I believe, if I remember correctly, she didn't really do anything else after this, but she's got a really good screen presence. And I really enjoyed the whole last 15 minutes of the film is bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers. I mean, the whole film is silly, but well, I wouldn't even say it's silly in a way that it's ridiculous and you just laugh how stupid it is. It does have kind of a nice story to it and everything, and there's slapstick and stuff. But yeah, I feel like it just goes in such a weird direction in the end. But I couldn't, even the last joke, I was laughing along as the credits roll. So I absolutely adored this film. It's one I'll watch again and again as well. I'm just finding such a wealth of entertainment in these Hong Kong classics from the 80s. I'm just enjoying them so much. There's another character called Second Great Granduncle or something, played by a guy who, surely is not that old at all and has all this makeup on, but he was a really good character. He was kind of the elder kind of father figure to Fatty, and he does a lot of kind of ceremonial things in the film, and he sells that stuff really well. And yeah, there's a lot of funny side characters, and so overall, I actually loved the film. I really did, and there's a lot of really interesting cinematography, as I've already said as well. And the film opens with kind of a funny joke sequence with Sammo kind of having a dream, and at first I wasn't sure if it was part of the main plot or not, but yeah, and I will share with you this one clip. I thought it really set the tone for me right at the beginning, because Sammo's character Fatty has this kind of wacky dream at the beginning, and then he wakes up just in the middle of the street, and so he gets up, and the second great granduncle, whatever he's called, he comes out to give him a kind of talking to, and then Fatty's like, "Well, slap me." So I'll just show you this clip right now because I just thought the payoff to it really made me laugh when I first saw it.
二叔公啊，唔該你打我一把。大力啲啊！喂呀！
I just, he's very meek and just like kind of just lightly taps it. No, slap me. Fucking clobbers him and he goes flying. It sets that sets the tone for the whole film, I think, in terms of the slapstick stuff. And Sammo is so brilliant at that, and the whole cast is. So yeah, absolutely love this. But let's talk about the Blu-ray now. So it does have the original Cantonese audio and an English dub to go along with it. And has also the original theatrical and home video mixes on the original Cantonese audio as well. I was kind of bummed to find out that in this film, at least, and I think many others, no one's really doing their own voice in the film. It's all different actors doing the dub, and they wouldn't record the sound on the films. So you're not hearing Sammo Hung or Wu Ma doing their own vocal performance, which is kind of disappointing. I wonder if that's like really readily apparent to people in Hong Kong and China. I mean, I suppose it must be, but for me it's imperceptible because I don't know the language. But that's kind of disappointing to hear, I suppose. But it is what it is. So we get two audio commentaries, one from Frank Zheng and Michael Worth, and another from Mike Leader and Arno Venema. Much like I said in my Yes Madam review, the Frank Zheng, Michael Worth stuff, you get Frank Zheng who's got all this information, and Michael Worth kind of is a nice kind of almost a straight man in a way to Frank Zheng's kind of just absolute motor mouth energy and all this information. And then the Mike Leader, Arno Venema commentary is a lot more filled with, context of the way people live in Hong Kong. And Mike talked about how the coffin that Lucho is brought in to the kind of town with is they still have those kind of coffins now in Hong Kong, and he actually was trying to purchase one, and so he tells all these little incidental stories about the film industry, but also about Hong Kong in general, and some good stuff learned. And they talk a lot about the kind of subgenre of these kind of spooky action comedies that kind of started in the early 80s in Hong Kong and kind of continued to spread, and this was another one of those ones that kind of jumped on the trend as well. Two excellent commentaries. I really enjoy all four of those guys. Now, the other extras are interesting for me. I want to talk about those a little bit. So we have an archival interview and audience Q&A with Sammo Hung, filmed in 2016 at the Udine Far East Film Festival in Italy. So he was promoting at the time his film, The Bodyguard. And I was blown away to see that, because you read the back, it's like an interview and an audience Q&A, and I imagine like a 20-minute thing. The interview itself is about, I think, 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. It's a fairly sizable interview. The Q&A is almost an hour long. I was like, holy shit. And I have to admit, it was hard to get through because his English isn't very good. He has a translator with him, and the person who's speaking to him is, I guess, Italian and speaking in English, and there's kind of things lost in translation. And there's a funny bit in the interview where Sammo Hung is like, he's trying to tell this story, and the translator's kind of interrupting. He's like, nah, let me tell story. He's just give me a second. He's trying his best, love him. He really is with the English, but it's not quite there. And so you just get these lulls where you're waiting for a translation, and then he has to ask the translator about what's this word in English and stuff. So it kind of drags. He tells a fun story about working with Bruce Lee and his Bruce Lee story. And then the Q&A, that was a bit of a slog for me for an hour long. I felt like I had to watch it just, for the purposes of this review. I would say unless you're a hardcore Sammo Hung fan, probably, worth a miss, but the commentaries are well worth listening to. I enjoyed them. He tells some interesting stories about how he poured all this money into this football team in Hong Kong that he spent years trying to and it was kind of a money pit, but he was so passionate about kind of being the second captain to this football, this soccer team of these young kids he was trying to inspire, and they did well at first, and then it kind of tapered off. So, you get these little interesting tidbits and stuff, and he talks a lot about his new film and other things like that, but the point gets lost in translation a lot of the times, or he'll finally get out something where I understand what he's talking about, and I get the joke, but then the translator repeats all of it again, and it's like, so you kind of left twiddling your thumbs a little bit, and he's kind of sat there kind of waiting for a while. So, but I do love that they included it. There's absolutely nothing in it about the dead and the deadly. The original title, I actually prefer. It's called People Scare People. It's kind of a fun. I like that title. It's kind of a good one. And there's even little bits that you wouldn't really get from the film watching it as an English-speaking person. But apparently Lucho's actual name in the film, because I don't know where Lucho comes from. It's in the English subtitles, but either way, well, again, I defer to Tim Wong, I guess, who I thought did such a great job on the subtitles. So I'm assuming Lucho comes from something. But apparently his full, Chinese name in the film is a pun or kind of an allusion to Big Horse's dick or Long Ant Dick or something like that. And so the joke there is that the character's impotent, but his name is like, slang for Big Horse's dick. So those are the kind of winning details you get from the audio commentaries. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just trying to look at my notes here. They talk about how in the commentary that white is the Chinese color of mourning, which I didn't even realize, and that kind of makes sense. And they talk about how the Chinese representative at the Queen's funeral was wearing whites, unlike everyone else. So that kind of dates the commentaries that were kind of recorded just after the death of Queen Elizabeth II. But yeah, so I really love that they did include the interview and the Q&A with Sammo Hung. It at least gives you some some Sammo sung. I'll leave that in for free. It gives you some Sammo Hung kind of contextual stuff. It's worth including something, I think, even if it's not directly linked to the movie itself, and just rounds off the package a little bit more, even if, again, like I said, maybe it's only for the Sammo Hung diehards. And there's the original Hong Kong theatrical trailer, which is like 4 minutes long. They show a lot, but it's all, I'm always going to want to see kind of how these films were marketed at the time. And I think that getting the trailers on the Blu-ray these days is becoming less and less of a thing. On these boutique labels, you are seeing it, which is great. So that's kind of all the on-disc stuff. I thought the transfer was great. They talk about how the film has never looked better, and in the old days of VHS and stuff, the kind of colors in the movie would never pop that much. So you're really getting like the best representation of this film visually that it's probably ever had. You do get the original kind of poster artwork there on the front, which I really like actually. It's a very colorful and vivid kind of piece with Sammo there in the kind of the paper mache disguise. And then obviously you get on the inside the new artwork that was created for this release and is on the slipcover. And then finally we get the booklet. So the booklet has one essay. I only just realized now, the fucking front cover of this is Sammo looking down the arse cheeks of Wu Ma. It is a funny shot in the film, I have to say. So the essay in this is by James Oliver, Burial Rights and Wrongs. With a play there on a certain other Hong Kong classic from the 80s. Putting the fun into funeral, it says funereal there, a bit of a typo, with the dead and the deadly. So this is a good one. It just goes into some of the background kind of stuff, and how Tony Raines praised this film as a kind of the ne plus ultra of Chinese black comedy. I don't know what ne plus ultra means, but there you go. So there's some images from the film and some promotional kind of, looks like lobby cards actually. That's pretty cool. Showcasing Wu Ma there in that ridiculous nose prosthetic that in both commentaries they're like, what's going on with that nose prosthetic from Wu Ma there. Yeah, these do look like like lobby cards. So you got Sammo and even the lobby cards of this film make me laugh. So you got Sammo there reaching down into Wu Ma's junk, and yeah. And there's definitely some very questionable kind of stuff with Lucho kind of latching over this woman who's supposedly pregnant with his kid. But yeah, so nice little booklet, doesn't have to stay its welcome or anything. We get another look. They just love this moment of Fatty looking right down the arse crack of Lucho. Anyway, so that's the Dead and the Deadly. I had such a blast with this, and I previously had bought Encounters of the Spooky Kind. See if I can find that. Yeah, it's right down here, and it's still sealed. Encounters of the Spooky Kind. So I feel like I should maybe watch this soon. So this is from 1980. It predates that. We have an audio commentary with Frank Jen. Of course we do. And yeah, so I just grabbed this because I love Sammo Hung and I had spare money at the time. But yeah, but the Dead and the Deadly. I can't wait to go back to it, to be honest with you. I just had such a blast with it, and I really enjoyed all the characters and the humor and the comedy. It was a really good time. So that's my thoughts on the Blu-ray. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.